Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome. Welcome. I'm Jan Jeremias, one of your hosts today. And a little bit about me. I'm an integrative health and wellness coach and author who works with people and their pets to empower them to overcome health challenges and live healthier lives. And once again, I'm really excited to be joined on stage with my co-host, collaborator, and dear friend, the amazing and very kind Mary Jane McQueen. So, Mary Jane, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Jan, and welcome everyone. Yeah, I'm always honored to be here with you. I was speaking to Jan. I always look forward to these Friday conversations because they usually bring such amazing insights. So I love that. And so I am Mary Jane. I am a graphic designer by trade, and I have my own creative studio where I help a lot of entrepreneurs to find their voice, the one that's authentic to them, so they can feel empowered and aligned in their vision as they put it out into the world. And as always, of course, I am pleased to join Jan on stage because she always shines brightly. So I pass it to you, Jan.
Okay, so welcome everyone. Once again, we're so grateful to be here together with you for this conversation and meditation on serenity, acceptance, and inner peace. Life has a way of presenting us with challenges, situations we wish were different, people we hope would change, and circumstances that feel beyond our control. And in those moments, we often find ourselves caught between acceptance and resistance, wondering, do we keep fighting? Do we let go? And if we do, does that mean we're giving up? But what if true serenity isn't about surrendering in defeat, but rather about embracing what is and choosing how we respond? What if the peace we seek isn't found in fixing the external world, but in shifting our inner world, our thoughts, our reactions, and our perspectives? So today, as we come together in this space, we are hoping to explore the balance between acceptance and resignation, to recognize that while we cannot always change what happens, we can change how we experience it. Together, we'll reflect on how to cultivate serenity, even in the midst of uncertainty, and how acceptance can empower rather than diminish us. So let's take a deep breath, inhale and exhale, and allow ourselves to fully arrive in this moment. Let's set down whatever weight we've been carrying, even if that's just for a short period of time, and open up ourselves to the possibility of peace and acceptance. And let's begin. Mary Jane, did you want to share our beautiful poem?
Yes, for sure. This is a beautiful poem by Julia Delaney, and it is titled The Secret to Inner Peace. You want to know the secret to inner peace? It's not about being flawless, a perfect masterpiece. Nah, the wisest ones, they've got it figured out. They make space inside for all of their doubts. See, I spent so long fighting with my own mind, convinced that these bad parts had to be left behind. The jealousy, the pettiness, the fear, and the shame. I met them with anger, thought I had to take the blame. But here's the thing, those parts I tried to dismiss, they were still me, still a part of all this. So every time I fought them, every time I disapproved, I was fighting myself, a battle that never moved. But where did that lead me? Straight to disease. A brush with mortality brought me to my knees. But in that crack, that moment when life broke open, the wisdom poured in, a truth I hadn't spoken. Acceptance, that's the key, the path to inner peace. Embracing all the parts, letting judgment cease, the light and the dark, the whole human experience, letting it all be there without interference. And the most amazing thing, when I started to let go, the peace I sought emerged and began to grow. No more fighting, no more internal strife, just being. just breathing, just living this life. If there's one thing I've learned, one truth that's clear, it's that peace is accepting all, even the fear, creating space within for all that you are, meeting yourself with compassion, no matter how far. That's the secret, the path to being whole, embracing all the parts, the beauty of your soul.
So, so beautiful, Mary Jane. Really took my breath away, that poem. I often think of how often I resisted those parts of myself which I labeled as bad and how much energy it took. Mary Jane and I got on, always get on a few minutes earlier, and we were talking about that, how much energy it takes to constantly think that something, there's a part of yourself that you label as bad. And maybe it's not the best, but that constant sort of almost nagging and voice in your head of like, why do I do this? Or I shouldn't be doing that. And always that dialogue in the back of your head. And I'm always very transparent on these calls, on these Zooms. And so I mean, I would say probably for probably the good majority of my life, the the most stressful or anxious time for me is mornings. I'm a morning person, but I get up and I'm always very, very agitated. And I've tried everything I think I can think of to kind of rid myself of this anxiety. It might be, aromatherapy and meditation and journaling and walking you know, and I've found certain things that help. But I think that original initial reaction of mine, that when I get up and that feeling, it was this constant voice in my head of like, oh my gosh, you're anxious again. And this constant like whipping of myself. And then more recently, it's just this voice that just says, just kind of accepting that it's there. Like, that's just part of who I am. And whether that be, not to say that I give up and I don't try different things, but I'm not also constantly berating myself for that sort of part of myself. And I'm probably the least anxious in the mornings that I've ever been. So bravo to me, I have to say. But it's just like that constant nagging of myself and trying to fix it all the time. Like every morning, okay, what can I do today? And almost like with this agenda and like to-do list, not a to-do list, Darlene, a to-do list of different things I can do to get it to go away. And I just had to let it be, like to allow it, like it's part. And it's probably the most valuable thing I've come to over the past like year. It's just, and we're all on this constant path. And it was just like, oh, okay, just take a deep breath and just let it be there. And does it go away? Maybe not. But I also don't have all that energy I'm expending towards something that obviously is not easy for me to change. And that was the other thing Mary Jane and I talked about a little bit in opening, before we got on, was this idea of a lot of those things which we have a hard time accepting. They're not easy for us to change. If they were, obviously, we would, wouldn't be a problem. We wouldn't be doing all this work. And to sit there and constantly um, be in this battle within yourself, just see, resistance is futile. An old Star Trek, Star Trek quote.
I'm laughing because I was
Uh,
just
from,
thinking the very
from
same
the
thing.
from the Borg, if you are a next generation person.
I'm laughing, Jan, because obviously, we're nerdy that way. So I was thinking the very same thing, and there you went and said it before I could actually get it out. So there you go. But it is true what you're saying, though, right? Like, because resistance, um, it really stems from the desire, the inner desire to like to control the outcomes. But it really just sometimes it prolongs the suffering, and it's not easy to let those things go. And it definitely requires patience and self-awareness and having a community around too, to support and encourage and uplift. That's key too. So that's thank you for sharing that, Jan, though. But because it's true, I think we all have those moments where, the anxiety or that control, the releasing it is really what we need to do, but we try to grab onto the reins even tighter. So I'm speaking from my own experience, of course. But yeah, it's I like how you were saying, like, accept it, being accepting doesn't mean being passive. It just means, you know, responding with resilience rather than resistance. So I love that.
Thank you. And I mean, I think of other situations in my life where, things happened and that part of it I could not change. And the only thing I could change was what I did based on those circumstances. That was the only thing I could control. And I think that that's what we realize too, as we're in relationships with other people. And I think a lot of times we go into a relationship and then we're in it, or a friendship, and then we think, oh well, maybe they'll change, or I'll do something and I'll help them to change. And as we realize, that's not something within our control, and we have to accept what it is and decide whether that acceptance is, whether it's something that we can, let's say, live with, or it's, we can ignore or just settle on. And when do we do that? And then we go on and we kind of, but the only thing we can affect or change is our own response to whatever is happening.
It's very true, Jan. And is it okay if I share a little snippet of the Serenity prayer?
Sure.
Yeah, so it just speaks to what we were speaking of knowing knowing when to let go, and the Serenity Prayer, which of course is very famous in many circles, but just the very first part of it for sure says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference, living one day at a time and enjoying one moment at a time, and accepting hardships as the pathway to peace. There's just this beautiful simplicity in that, and there's such an sense of it is about surrender, to that into the serenity of letting go and accepting ourselves for who we are, because you know we're not meant to be fixed. We not that we don't have pathways to improve, but we're not broken, so we don't need to be fixed. We're perfect just as we are.
Absolutely. Oh, Seamus, great. I always love the Serenity Prayer for years. It's something that does truly speak to, what we're speaking to today, but also has always spoken to me. Seamus?
Yeah, thanks very much again. As usual, guys. I love the poem and the conversation. And what was coming to mind then, like Mary Jane touched on it, I think a little bit about self-awareness. I was thinking about as the kind of conversation has developed, and um aligned with self-awareness is the whole power of observing, and observing the roles and the identities that we assume in a very busy world. And kind of this came up, and I think in being 100% human as well, around like we're the brother, we're the sister, we're the father, we're the son, we're the boss, we're this, that, and the other. And I think observing how we're playing those roles, I think there's great power in that, because then it comes back to actually through that process of not investing so much importance in those external roles, And through that observance and self-awareness, we can actually go back to the idea of perspective, which is the pathway towards serenity, I think, and creating space to actually, through observing and that self-awareness, to come back in and actually begin to observe what you touched on, Jan, was the inner voice, like this very demanding, critical inner voice, and then become to observe, maybe from the practice of observing how we're showing up outside, we can then take it to the next stage and maybe begin to observe the inner voice and engage and get curious with that inner voice and challenge the inner voice. And I think that's where actually that beautiful book you recommended to me. It's Cornfield. What was Cornfield's first name? It was Jack. Sorry, Jack Cornfield. Wrote about this and the power of observing, and it actually was a real nice reminder for me of the power of observing and being aware and harness and applying that actually deliberately towards and again the word compassion has come up in some conversations Jason and I have had recently as well, is we can begin to allow ourselves to actually observe and in a dispassionate way, if you want to use that word, and compassionate way around observing the inner voice, not attaching any power to it. And I simply by detaching from the inner voice and getting curious with it and observing it for what it is, taking that breath and through just that simple process of actually observing the inner voice and creating space to notice where that inner voice is coming from. And Jack Cornfield talks about then observing. That's where the true power of think emerges then and is the pathway to serenity, is that process of diffusing the inner voice through simply noticing it and engaging with it and getting curious with it and understanding where the hell is this inner voice and why is this inner voice saying this to me now? And then repeatedly doing that, so as we notice how helpful that becomes, we can then actually experience, like back to that word experience of when we experience just simply noticing, not getting drawn into the game of the inner voice, but actually just dispassionately engaging with, not allowing, and just enjoying the experience of, I'm just going to sit with this and allow myself to not get triggered by that inner voice and follow the narrative and believe the narrative of the inner voice. I'm actually now going to actually just accept it, engage with it, get curious with it, and diffuse it through that process and remove its power. And that, I think, is when you're operating from that space, is the pathway to serenity, when you're able to actually to sit with it, challenge it through that gentle process. And then you're again back to that lovely quote from a podcast. You're engaging with the heart that's prepared for anything, even that harsh inner voice. Through that process, it no longer, through repeated observing the inner voice, engaging with the inner voice, not allowing it to actually harm us, but actually to use it as a mechanism through which then we can actually begin to operate more and more and more from a space that we almost welcome the inner voice, because then we know it's not, it's opening a door for us to actually observe and operate from our true self. So our true self is actually the observer of the inner voice. And that's what Jack Cornfield talks about. That's where true serenity may emerge from, when we're operating from being the observer of the inner voice rather than believing that the inner voice is us.
Thank you, Seamus. Love that. I mean, in addition, I think it's this observing of the circumstance of the situation. I've been thinking about that a lot, and certain things that cannot be changed and how much we resist that. So not only do we sort of observe our response and that voice, but we're observing the circumstance itself to to come up with a valuable, let's say a very, sort of heartfelt decision of like, can this be changed? Is this something that I have to that I have to accept? Um, not accept in the fact that it's happening, so you have to accept it. but is it worth, like, what is the next step and what is the voice telling me? And I was thinking about that because one of my clients said this to me the other day. We were talking about something, and I might have mentioned it the other day. And that was like managing expectations and that sort of influence, or the way that affects like the circumstance is what we expect to happen, or the fact that we want something to change and we're hoping it'll change. I mean, really, it's not within our control to change it. And I was thinking of this idea of expectation a lot. And she used a line which I now carry with me all the time. And she said, it's like going into the same situation all the time. Like you go into a hardware store and you're expecting to buy milk. And it just it makes me, yeah, thank you, Mary Jane. It makes me laugh because it's so true. I think we go into circumstances, like the same circumstance, and expect it's going to be different. And we have a hard time accepting the fact that it's the same. But when it's something that we should just honor the fact that that's the way it is, not in that idea of resignation, that's the way it is. And the only thing I can do is move on from that space. Jason, please.
Yeah, first, I just want to say that I really love this group. So thank you, Mary Jane and Jan. And I've missed being here as of late. I've been burning the candle at both ends, trying to be extremely present in the moment and, just taking in what the universe brings me and staying calm. And so a lot going on in my life, but it was interesting because I was on a call Wednesday night with some friends, and on Thursday, yesterday, I was actually thinking of Jan, and she messaged me last night on LinkedIn, and I thought, okay, so lean into that, and I've been having a standing call on Fridays at this hour. And I went to bed last night, after Jan and I had messaged with one another. And I woke up this morning to an email from my Friday call that said, could we reschedule? Because something came up in their world that shifted their day. And I thought, this is an invitation to be here today. So I love that. And the universe is speaking. We have to listen. And so I wanted to say all that. But I was listening to the Serenity Prayer and what Seamus and Jan were just speaking about, and it made me think of an event. A friend of mine recently ran a half marathon, and before the race, he fasted for 3 days, which is insane. And he wanted to bring himself to a state of wholeness, a state of euphoria, closer to God, get out of his head. And so he meditated and fasted for 3 days before the race. And he told me, so I was asking him about his experience during the half marathon. And he told me that, into his 11th mile, about a mile and a half left in the race, his mind started to think about how much left he had to do, and he felt his body starting to get tired. And he immediately was self-aware, paid attention to that, removed those thoughts of how much further he had to go. And he said, I just started focusing on my breath and my rhythm, staying in the moment. And I realized if I do that, the finish line will come to me. And I thought that was so powerful. In fact, I'm getting chills telling you that. But it's so true because that's kind of been my journey lately, is just not thinking about the outcomes or what we want to. I mean, of course, we want to have goals. We want to put the energy out there where we want to achieve. But to the topic of this conversation, we can't control that. We can only control what the moment that we're in, and the energy that we're putting out there. And we just make it healthy energy, make it loving energy, and the finish line will come to us. So thank you.
What an amazing thing. I put it in the chat. What an amazing inspirational phrase. I mean, the finish line will come to me. And it's all about that element of trust and leaning into trust, isn't it? It's just that's just a beautiful phrase. I wrote it down in the chat and I wrote it down on my paper too. So there you go. But yeah, what a beautiful perspective. And thank you, Jason. We love to have you here, your energy here in our conversation. And definitely whenever you're available, because that's the thing, right? We all have our things, but I'm so glad that you were called to be here and the universe gave you the opportunity to be here with us today. So I love that. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah, divine timing.
Well,
Um,
Divine's in the house and she just
I
raised her
know, I know. And she
hand.
just raised her hand. I know, I know. That wasn't planned, but it was planned. It was because everything is divine timing. And I love that story though. The- having been a runner and just knowing that place, never having fasted for 3 days prior to a run. Can't say I ever did that, but getting into that place of where when we talk about the mind, like being able to trick us or that voice, um, it's very easy to get caught up in that voice, negative or positive. I mean, I've had circumstances where, your voice starts to play tricks on you in a run and you do some unwise things. For me, anyway, they were unwise. Having, doing almost marathons and like hot as like blazes weather, like August weather in New Jersey, hot and humid, and decided that I wasn't going to drink water because I wanted to shave time off my time. But, not a wise decision on my part. But other things where, we get so caught up in whatever it is that we just feel, and we're not, and we do have to follow that rhythm and that flow. And we have to listen to what Seamus spoke about. Like you have to learn how to listen and cultivate that inner listening. And, you know, and everybody I speak to is who's been a runner, a marathoner, or a triathlete, it's like we have this like the mind will very quickly talk to you into decisions that really are not wise very quickly. And then the ego gets caught up in that scenario. I have a really close friend who's a triathlete who was doing an Ironman in Hawaii and said that one of his packs of like, protein gels or whatever fell off his bike on the bike. And he said that he should have stopped to get it. And he said he didn't because he thought, well, it'll waste like, how many seconds of time. And he said he ended up like not crashing physically, but like literally he crashed. He said it was the biggest mistake he ever made. But in the moment, his mind said, well, what do you mean? That'll shave like a minute off your time, so we do some really interesting things as human beings. Divine, please.
Hi, rise and shine, everybody. Thank you so much, Jan, for reminding me of this event. I knew there was one, but I couldn't find the link. So thank you so much, sister. Um, I put something in the chats because Jason really touched me with his share, and I kind of missed a little bit of what Seamus was sharing when I came in. But I put that in the chats because I heard it somewhere, and then I started to reflect on it. I was like, wow. When I think about my mind, I've been doing a lot of transformational work within my health and my routines, and it has to include my mindset as well, right? And when I thought about what I had put in the chats about how the mind, it's like a movie screen, right? We have all these images, all these voices and images, like a movie, like we're watching a movie. And when we play the movie on our TV screen, is the TV affected? No, because the TV is just the observer. It's observing the movies that are playing, right? So the more that I remind myself and create safety in my brain. The mind requires safety in order to move forward, in order to change a thought, a perspective. It needs to know it's okay. And I'm at a point in my life where I'm regulating my nervous system and I'm going to say continuing to, because I've been doing this stuff for years, continuing to reparent my mind into safety, and I do this with words of affirmations. I do this with energizing my body and my core. I've been working on my core strength, my mobility, because it's not just my mind, but it's a component of the mind, the body, and the soul. They all have to work together, and I remember telling myself for years, oh, you're okay. I am okay. I am loved. I'm doing my best, da 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 da. All these positive affirmations. And my body was like, no, 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 we are not okay. Some things have to change. So my mind was saying, you're okay. We're working on positive affirmations. But the body was like, no, things have to change. Your environment has to shift. The things you're putting into your body, what you're feeding, your energy, your time has to shift so we can be okay in a totality way, right? So self acceptance is like the total way of being okay is working with all the bodies that we have, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, working with all of them and not neglecting one or the other, and not just positive, loving, lighting our way to the finish line, right? There's no fucking finish line, but right, it's a journey, excuse my French, and so I think it's wonderful that we're able to hack the brain, or I would say be the governor of your own mind, and also listen to your body and say, how can we do this in small steps to create the change, to have more courage and empowerment and get that wheel of motion going? I like to call it the wheel of motion, right? To get it going, to empower thyself and know that we can do challenging things. We come here to evolve and transform, and I know I have a deep placement within my blueprint in my astrological chart that tells me I am a transformer. And it's crazy because I was seeing transformer stickers on people's bumper cars, and I mean bumper stickers on people's cars, transformer stickers. And it's like all the signs and synchronicities are showing me where I am right now. So it's also reparenting my brain to see these things and to confirm these things. This is where you are. You're in a transformational period. So you have to accept this, surrender to this, allow this, and create that safety that the brain needs for your new structure, your new foundation. So yeah, I'll land it there, loves. Thank you.
Thank you, Divine. What do you think that whole idea of restructuring? And because I think, well, it's we're not dumb, and I think our brains realize when we're feeding ourselves a whole bunch of BS, when we have our own BS meter. It's kind of like, we tell things to ourselves, and our brain is like, do we really believe them? Nah. But we're trained, and we try to tell ourselves these things, and then we're like, okay, the brain, and part of you is resisting that whole thing, what we started about. It's resisting because it's not taking that in. It doesn't believe it. And over time, eventually you train yourself, or you come to the point where you do believe it. You're a powerful person. But if you're not feeling very powerful and you tell yourself that, you have to ask yourself, like, and I'm not saying you don't do that, but you have to, it's like a little perspective here. It's like I tell myself some stuff sometimes, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm telling myself this, but I really don't believe a word I'm saying right now. And then you get to the point where a day happens and then you do believe it. And then another day happens and you do believe it. And it just builds and builds and builds. But you have to get to that point, I think. So Seamus, did you want to share?
Yeah. Thanks for that, Jan, and Divine as well. And yeah, as Divine was speaking, as you're speaking there now as well, the whole idea of experience, like you, what we do and how we show up, and how we experience and challenge and notice and observe. I think that's a lifetime's work, basically, because we so easily fall into the idea of comparisons, and I need to show up this way, and I'll show up and assume this identity in this way, in this situation. You talked earlier on about situations and circumstances, and we convince ourselves, maybe from the listening to the inner voice and following the guidance of the inner voice, and often ill-guided ill-guided advice, that I need to show up and do this in this situation at work or at home or within a relationship with my son or with my daughter or with whoever, and we decide like without really being connected or observing, we just do it automatically. And I think the power of what we're talking about today is the power of observance and the power of challenging and not accepting the guidance of the inner voice, which is often BS, basically, as you put it, John. And again, as Divine was speaking, and something I've been thinking about lately is the whole idea of like the the whole realm of emotions from fear to love. We all kind of accept, I think, and come to think about all the emotions and everything that's we experience in our everyday lives, from those two kind of extremes, from extreme love to extreme fear. And I think there's an opportunity then, through observing any emotion, we get the opportunity to be able to actually um, grow roots of wisdom down to who we truly are, through engaging with whatever emotion comes up, whether it's anger, fear, sadness, frustration, love, you name it. Basically, these are all fuel for us to be able to actually grow the roots of down to operating with more and more wisdom. And maybe that's why we maybe get wiser with age, that we practice engaging with the inner voice, practice, experiencing and changing how we engage with any emotion. And then it's through that experience and that practice, and through getting better at making sense of these emotions, that we actually grow those stronger, firmer roots, back to that word foundation that you used as well, right at the end there, Divine, around you're now operating from a much firmer foundation through those roots back to your own true being, and allowing yourselves to operate from that allows you to not be so controlled, let's say, or influenced by how you think you should show up by the standards of other people, but you're operating from a place of showing up because you're so grounded and connected to your own true identity, and experiencing the power of operating from that space to be able to actually quieten what other people think about who you are, what you are. But from that foundation, I think it's so liberating and empowering. And I suppose that's my own experience, is that when you create those roots and operating with that level of observance and awareness from within, you care less about what other people think. You honor other people and their perspectives. You do care, but I think it's a better blend of caring that goes on and begins with self, and then to be able to actually engage better from that space and engage better with other people in an authentic way as well. So I hope that kind of describes maybe my own journey, maybe, and what's coming up in the conversation today as well.
Well, thank you, Seamus. And one of the things that, I've been spending a lot of time listening to a lot of things, reading a lot of things about those big emotions, like the big ones that we tend to not want to admit that we have, things like jealousy and envy and anger, which we label as negative emotions. And I think part of this whole process that you describe is this whole idea of accepting that those emotions are within us, kind of looking at them, as Susan David says, as signposts, as kind of opportunities to reflect and to pause. But I think that so many of us walk around the world thinking, oh my gosh, I shouldn't be feeling that because that's a bad emotion. Like, I should not do that. I shouldn't get angry. And I think that's determined by gender, upbringing, where, what country we grow up in. There are certain things that are not supposed, quote unquote, not appropriate for us to be thinking or feeling. And I think that that whole part to me of accepting all that we are, from that poem originally that we read today, is that, accepting that it's a part of you is really, like, to me, the first step, as opposed to denying that you feel, or denying that you're in a specific like circumstance and it makes you feel like angry. Is so, like, okay, that makes me angry. Like, what is that telling me, and what does it reveal? And you know okay, from there, where do I go? It's the whole idea of not being so hard on ourselves. The fact that we are human beings, and we talk a lot about this, and not human doings, and we're supposed to have all these parts of ourselves all together at the same time. I finally get now when my yoga teacher, who I trained with, used to say, yoga is the recognition that we are complete and whole, because that's what it truly means. Yoga, to yoke, to unite, to bring together. And so that's that's many people's practice, but that's the practice, that's life's practice, right? And that's when she said that you can't fail yoga, because failing yoga would be like failing life. So it goes together. Divine.
Yes, this is so good today. Oh my goodness. I was thinking about something that I had wrote down too was the natural state of being, our natural state of being and getting back into harmony with ourselves is so important. And I don't think that, I'm going to say it this way. I don't think that a lot of people, some people, most people are starting to wake up and starting to realize how much density and programming that we have been conditioned into. The body itself holds a lot of density, holds a lot of weight to keep us here. So we're not floating in our light body or floating in our spirit body, right? And the body has to experience a lot of things, and the more that we allow it to experience without the criticism or the harsh judgments, the more that we are able to have the total experience here on earth. And that's another reminder that I keep reminding myself, you know, and there is no right or wrong on why something is the way it is. How many of us still operate from a left brain, right brain duality? Oh, this is right, this is wrong. I should be doing this, I should be doing that. Why isn't this working out? Instead of being in that midpoint of infinite possibilities. This can work out. All is possible. I'm here to experience the totality. Even the mistakes are a part of the totality because there are no mistakes. What if, right? What about the what ifs? I like to tell my brain, but what if there is no mistakes? What if I am just here to experience the totality of life in this body and we will be okay? So rewiring is so important and honing in on that and creating that safety and that security and honing in on that. And the last thing I wanted to mention was the questions that we can ask ourselves. I wrote this down yesterday. So I've been doing a lot of note keeping and a lot of teaching myself lately, right? Being my own teacher because I truly believe that we all come here to learn from our own experiences, which creates the wisdom. But without embodying it, it's like hard to pass down that wisdom because everybody's an example. Everybody you see, including yourself, is an example. So I like to pass down the wisdom by being the example, by embodying what I'm transforming or changing or learning within myself. And sometimes we need a isolation period, time of teaching and transformation in order to come back and be more empowered and be more in love and sharing in sacred spaces that create harmony and alignment. We require reciprocity as human beings. So what are you feeding and what are you allowing are the two questions I ask myself. What are you feeding, divine? What are you feeding into your life? What are you feeding into your body? What are you feeding into meditation, to prayer, whatever that is? What are you feeding and what are you allowing? Right? What are you allowing to be consumed into you? What are you allowing yourself to consume? What are you allowing yourself to absorb? You know? So, yeah, just wanted to share that last point. Love. Thank you.
It reminds me of like some phrases that I've been, when we do go down that road of whatever the path, that path of, whatever we're listening to in our heads is it useful? Like, is what I'm telling myself useful? Is it helpful? Um, those questions to me and are so valid and so important is we need to question. We need to ask ourselves to look and like you said, like, you're feeding yourself. Like, what am I feeding myself? What does, what do I watch? What do I choose to listen to all day? Who do I choose to surround myself with? Like, am I in groups like this or am I in other groups which maybe don't serve me and who I am? And realizing that that's okay. You don't need to be in every group. You don't need to have 1,000 friends, 1,000 followers. You just need some really valuable people that get to reflect back to you what you need to see and have you be a reflection to them. Darlene, the lovely Darlene.
Thank you. What a beautiful reflection and evolution. Um, I feel like so my catchphrase that came to me, I don't know, about a year and a half ago is, that's curious. And a couple people have said you need to put it on a t-shirt because this is a good reminder that for me, when things are feeling overwhelming, I can appreciate, Jan, what you said at the beginning about waking up in the morning and just feeling that, like just feeling a lot of feelings. And it's taken me a number of years to show some self-compassion to myself, to have to embrace that mindful curiosity where I'm not jumping into that overreaction and that self-defeating conversation around I'm doing this wrong, or why do I feel like this? How come this keeps coming up? Shouldn't I have learned by now? And it's such a wonderful culmination of everything, right? It's the boundaries, it's our language, it's our self-respect, our opportunity to really embody and be present for ourselves. And in that, it's funny, it's such a simple sentence, but for me, it has really been life-changing because it's in that, that's curious moment that it allows me that pause. It allows me that opportunity to remember that the way I'm going to move forward from this moment is for me, because of me, because I'm allowing myself that moment to really observe what's happening around me. And I love that analogy of the TV screen, that the divine, that TV, like you just, a light bulb moment went off. That the TV doesn't change. Absolutely. So when I have that, that's curious moment, I'm trying not to move into that heightened fight or flight, but that's curious. Why did that trigger me? There's got to be a little bit more to it. And it also has allowed me a little bit of self-compassion when I'm looking at other people as well too, when they potentially are reacting or being in a way that maybe is not the way is uncomfortable for me, is probably the best way to put it, to say, that's curious. I wonder what they're going through right now that's causing this kind of reaction, or that's if they've maybe spoken really harshly to me, or if it's just something that has really put me off. But I think it's such a beautiful gift in evolution that it's going to continue to happen, right? I have not figured it out completely, nor will I ever, because as my environment changes, so too do I. And I think that's when you embrace that as a gift and an opportunity to just reflect. It really, for me, it has really changed the trajectory. And thank you, everybody, for sharing.
Well, thank you, Darlene. So many gems and a few of the things. So my phrase is always, isn't that interesting? That's my phrase instead of, I'm curious. It's like, oh, isn't that interesting when something comes up for me? That's really when I start to look at it. And I do believe that as you navigate, as we all have or are doing this path, you do cultivate a huge amount of empathy, compassion, and understanding for other people. Um, if things we considered about ourselves to be negative, let's say, were so easy to change, then, when we look at other people, we realize that, basically they're doing the best they can, that if it was so easy, for some of the things that they go through, that they would have changed it. But obviously, whatever it is, as I spoke to when we opened, is those real that morning time for me, whatever the reason is. And can I delve into it? And I have, yeah, and I continue to, but it is somewhat hardwired. It's just who I am. And embracing that versus resisting that, accepting that versus going down the battle of, what's in my head and why am I feeling like this? And what is it about? And, being the scientist, everything should have a reason, you know, should be able to solve this like I solve any sort of problem. But it's not that easy. And that idea of compassion and acceptance is huge, I feel. Al, did you want to share something?
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad that you shared you're actually a detective of your own lives. You're like the Sherlock Holmes. Of your own. Every day you're finding out something new, experiencing it. It's like you are the actor of the life in the TV screen. You just come into the TV screen and you act in every day whatever you're doing. So basically, like for example, like a TV commercial is about a drug that prevents shingles. That's in the book of Dr. Joe Dispenza's Supernatural. So in one of the chapters, they're saying that it's the programming, programming of the mind. So if that the TV commercial just showing the person taking out the shirt and the body full of rashes and all that. That was the shingles, and one in three of the one third of the people in the world will have that type of disease. But they do not show the name of the drug at the end of the commercial. But it's just to show that people is programming the state of the mind that they need that drug to help them to to relieve the pain and all that. But eventually, it's all like part of the alpha programming. It's like from the beginning of the beta in the waves of our minds, beta going to the alpha programming before going to the theta state and all that. So basically, it's more of the coping mechanism that is in our body, like what our mindfulness, the power of now, what we are facing now, and how our heart can be in coherence with our thinking, like mind, body, and soul. So basically, it's all aligning your seven chakras within yourselves, and from there, basically you're just from controlling your emotions, so that you feel more comfortable in our life and whatever our daily practice like meditation and all that will go. And it also goes in the scope of the mind movies. Whatever the mind movies is better than the normal TV commercials. And that was developed by some Australian couple and all that. And it also gives a kaleidoscope. Kaleidoscope is like colorful. Something is in our mind and pictures. When during our younger days, the kaleidoscope of the different colors that are appearing in front of the screen, the images and music, automatically comes out. So that's very powerful, for us every day when we're doing our meditation and our daily practices. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Al, so much. And I do think, yes, it is so valuable to have practices that we do every day, whatever that be to give us that opportunity to reflect and to pause. One of my favorite words, to pause and to reflect and to see, because we are very easily distracted and very easily pulled out because this work, that we all do is, it's very easy for us to escape. And I was thinking that, of that whole image of that TV screen and that it's our choice to change the channel. Is we don't have to watch that same show over and over and over again. And we can go up and say, okay, I'm going to switch or I'm going to turn off but maybe we don't turn it off. Maybe we just switch that recording that is being played in our head all, over and over and over again. And we do get to the point where, we realize that it is within, it is a choice that we need to make. We can go down the same road we've gone down for the last whatever, how many years that we're on this earth. Or we can make a choice. And that a choice is like, okay, how do I want to live? And certain days you don't make wise choices. We're human beings. And others days we make really wise choices.
That's so true, Jan. I was just thinking about how, we, and thank you, Al, for putting that idea of Sherlock Holmes in my mind, that we're detectives in our own lives or minds. I love that. That's so true. Figuring out the mystery of our minds, our way of being is but the Sherlock Holmes was very cool visual to put out there. But yeah, just what you're speaking to is just like, that by taking that time for reflection and allowing yourselves the grace and ease to move along the path. Well, maybe we don't always have the answers because, that's all about us wanting to be in control and leaning into that trust. And really, for me, I know like the peace really does come from, allowing that space and time to distinguish between what's in my control and what's not. Um, because as I say, we're all doing the best they can with the things we know at the time. So, we're moving slowly, but yeah, what a valuable point you were saying about being in a community space like this and others of just being able to share our voices, to share our hearts and realize, as again, that we are not alone on this path. We may be a few steps ahead, we may be a few steps behind, we may be walking side by side depending on the situation, but just really knowing that we're not alone and that we have a community of people that are there to lift us up. So, yeah, very, very amazing conversation.
Reminds me of a line, I think it's a line by Rumi, is we are just walking each other home.
Yes. That's such a beautiful visual.
Mm.
It's there's there's a that sense of community, that sense of friendship and I love this. I love this a lot. So and yeah, I love this conversation. As always, these conversations are amazing and yeah, thank you for joining in them today and I think it's a good opportunity, Jan. I know you probably have a few words of reflection, but for us to move into a meditation, I feel a need for calm and peace. So maybe it's just
Absolutely.
me.
Oh, no, absolutely. And so we will move into our meditation. Begin by finding a comfortable position. Feel free to sit, lie down. If you feel comfortable, feel free to close or soften your eyes. Take a deep breath in, a deep cleansing breath, and slowly exhale. Allow yourself to settle into this moment, knowing that there is nowhere else to be, nothing else to do. This time is yours. As you continue to breathe, begin to scan your body. Notice any areas where you might be holding tension. Could be your jaw, your shoulders, your hands, your stomach. Without forcing, without forcing anything to change, simply bring awareness to that place, to those places. Now shift your focus inward. Notice if there's something in your life that you have been resisting, a situation, an emotion, a relationship, a part of yourself. Maybe it's something that feels unfair, something you wish were different. And as you hold this in your awareness, notice how it feels in your body. Where do you feel the weight of this resistance? Is it tightness in your chest, a clenching in your stomach, a heaviness in your heart? Rather than pushing it away, I invite you to take a deep breath in. And as you exhale, imagine this resistance softening. Even just a little. Breathe in ease. Breathe out struggle. Breathe in peace. Breathe out resistance. With each breath, imagine this tightness loosening, the weight becoming lighter. Let go of the need to control. Let go of the need for things to be different. Just allow them to be as they are. Release the struggle. Now, silently or softly repeat to yourself, I release my need to resist. I allow things to be as they are. I trust that I can find peace even here. If your mind tries to bring you back into this realm of resistance, that's okay. Simply notice it and then return to your breath. Each inhale brings in space. Each exhale releases the struggle. Imagine resistance as a tight knot inside of you. And with every breath, that knot begins to loosen just a little bit, to unwind, uncoil. You do not need to carry the weight anymore. As you rest in this space, feel a deep sense of peace wash over you. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are choosing to let go of the fight against what is. If you feel comfortable, place a hand over your heart and silently affirm, I surrender my resistance. I embrace what is with openness and grace. I allow peace to flow through me. Take a final deep breath in. And as you exhale, imagine yourself lighter, freer, and more at ease. When you're ready, gently bring your awareness back to your body. Feel free to move fingers, toes. And when it feels right, open your eyes. Thank you all so much for joining us today, Mary Jane and I, and each of one of you who adds to kind of the conversation and who is present. Your energy is so welcome and so treasured. Please take a moment to connect with both Mary Jane and I for one-on-one. We would love to connect with you. Just as an FYI, our next workshop is Sunday, April 27th at 2 p.m. All of our audio Zooms are now on our YouTube channel, Spirit Born Imagining's YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and listen to any of them or share them with people, please feel free. We would love for you to subscribe and comment. Um, have a wonderful weekend, a blessed weekend. We hope to see you again next Friday. And have a great weekend and week, everybody.
And thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here and sharing your beautiful energy and insights. We truly value our community here. So thank you so much. And we'll see you next week.
Yes.
Thank you.